So talk to me here. Did the Rockets give him too much power?
I don't think so. Listen, when you're the star, when you're the franchise, when you're the box office attraction and you play like a superstar, you deserve to have cachet. You deserve to have clout. The question is how you exercise it. See, the issue in question shouldn't be, did James Harden have too much power? The question should be, did he utilize it and exercise it appropriately? And if you've got people waiting for team planes, if you've got people waiting to start the film session and what have you, if it is true that Russell Westbrook was like, damn it, start the film, start without him, and that lent itself towards Russell Westbrook being the professional that he is, not liking tardiness and what have you, if that's something that turned him off, then that's something that needs to be addressed. I think the biggest thing is this. If James Harden had something to do with Kevin McHale, Houston ultimately moving on from Kevin McHale, which he did. If he had something to do with them moving on from Dwight Howard, which he did. If he had something to do with them moving on from CP3, when CP3 wanted him to not stand around and watch when the ball wasn't in his hand and to be an active participant in the flow of the offense, et cetera, et cetera. And that was a reason that CP3 was gone, and James Harden had something to do with that, which he did. That's where it becomes a problem. Because if you're the Houston Rockets organization, you should be in a position to say, look at all we've done for you, not just in terms of the money, but the level of control we've allowed you to have. And it comes across as if it is an abuse of power. And where James Harden, who I love and respect personally, and he's a superstar, and as far as I'm concerned, if he wants out, damn it, move him. Don't move him for cheap. Make sure you get equitable compensation, but you don't keep your star there if he wants to leave, because the brother didn't miss games. He came out there and played, leading the league, one of the league leaders in minutes played, playing through injuries, always showing up. I don't give a damn that he went to Vegas on his off day and parties. Did he show up to work when he was called upon, and did he produce? And the answer to both of those questions are yes. So I'm going to defend James Harden to the hilt in that regard. But what I will say is that with the backdrop of all of this leaking from the Houston Rockets organization, clearly the bottom line is that if you've done all of that for James Harden, then James Harden shouldn't be seen at a strip club or at a party without a mask on around a bunch of people gone from the team for an additional 6 days just to ensure that there's a negative COVID test that would follow. That is the height of irresponsibility and selfishness. And that's where James Harden hurts himself, because of how he's perceived as conducting himself over the last week. I understand why he's doing it, because he's sending a message. I'm not going to be cooperative if you don't get me up out of here. I totally get that, because he's a professional dude. But in the end, you still shouldn't do that, particularly when you have that history that people are pointing to where you had such a degree of control, because then folks are going to come back and they're going to get other players. They may not get James Harden max, but they'll get other players to follow. They did it when LeBron went from Cleveland to South Beach. They didn't get LeBron, but they got the players in that next collective bargaining agreement. They were dogged in certain respects, some of the particulars that I don't need to get into. And that might not have been the case if their feathers weren't ruffled. And sometimes the superstars need to be sensitive to the players below them in terms of stature. Be considerate of that when they choose to conduct themselves in certain ways.
No, the Rockets didn't give Harden too much power. Harden took the power. That's the NBA. The billionaire owners have a de facto monopoly over professional basketball in North America. And if you want to play and get paid at the highest level, you have to do business with them. So they have an enormous advantage over the players' union when they negotiate the collective bargaining agreement, right? And in return, what the players do is use what leverage they have. And in the NBA, unlike the NFL or any other sport really, a superstar player has enormous leverage because players are not as fungible as they are in the NFL, right? You can almost replace anyone with the exception of a few quarterbacks. They're not as, they have an outsized impact on the fortunes of your team, unlike Major League Baseball, where even the best player ever, you add them to a team, they can still be in last place, right? So those superstars bend the letter of the law at the very least and violate the spirit of it, for sure. when they exercise leverage. That's how they do it. James Harden is sending a strong signal here. I don't want to be here anymore. You got to let me go. And he's right. They have. It's untenable. You're not going to be able to keep him there. Okay. Now, what are we really seeing here? What we're seeing here is what happens when Daryl Morey and Mike D'Antoni leave. Because for all the complaining, and Fertitta was on our show, Stephen A. was on First Take, and he wants to win, and I get it. But if what you were getting wasn't good enough, careful, because what's coming next might be a lot worse. The fact of the matter is the Rockets never had the talent to compete with anyone. They should have never been in the Western Conference Finals in a Game 7 against the Warriors with a healthy KD, Clay, Steph, Dre. The Warriors were fully loaded, right? They had a 73-win team. They added KD, but they had to play a road game in a Game 7 in the Western Conference Finals. And Chris Paul wasn't available because of the hamstring. And the Rockets had the worst shooting night of all time at one point, going 0 for 27 from 3. And still the Warriors only won by single digits. Now, I'm not saying you can argue, Stephen A., well, the Rockets wouldn't have won anyway. Fine. I'm not even going to argue that. The point is, the Rockets should have never come that close. How were they able to get that close? Because Daryl Morey is playing chess to a lot of GM's checkers, and Mike D'Antoni was willing to say to hell with what anyone thinks. This is the way we're playing. If it's ugly, if people will criticize if it doesn't work in the playoffs, because we don't have enough talent is the truth, I don't care. And it got them way closer than they ought to have been. Now what happens? Fertitta thought, that's not good enough. Now Daryl Morey's gone. All hell breaks loose. Welcome to the way everyone else lives when you don't have a truly great GM in place. This is what happens. Did they give James Harden too much power? Stephen A., you have to ask yourself if you're an owner in the NBA. Do you want a superstar or not? Because really, you probably need two to win a championship. Two superstars, not just one. Because this is what happens when you have a superstar. You have to play ball with them because they exert enormous influence. They do have leverage. So either you want to be a great team with a chance for a championship, or you don't want to deal with this headache. It's one or the other.
You're missing the point. And the reason why you're missing the point, Max Kellerman, is because you're talking about what James Harden is doing now as he's trying to exit from the Houston Rockets. The story that was published today is what he was doing when he was happy, when he got his money, when he had his GM, when he had his head coach, when he had the players he chose. There's a difference. And what I'm talking about is when you have that backdrop, this is what you are when you're happy. Then you sit up here and you act like this now, even though I completely support him wanting out of Houston. If that's what you want, that's what you want. I don't like the fact that he's doing that with Stephen Silas, an African-American who who worked for 20 years as an assistant. But the point is that he is doing now what some people are saying he did when he was happy. And then you brought up the Warriors. I got news for you, Max Kellerman. You can sit up there and say they should. Yeah, sure, no problem. You can sit up there and say they shouldn't have gone to the finals. Yeah. Fine. But other than the Warriors, there was nobody better than them in the Western Conference. So they absolutely should have been in the Western Conference Finals.
There's nobody better than them in the Western Conference because of the way they played ball. They didn't have so much talent on that team. They had James Harden on that team, and Chris Paul was hurt, and yet still they extended the Warriors in that game even when they had a miserable shooting performance. Wait, here's my point, Stephen A. It's interesting to me. I'm not debating that point with you. Now we're examining, you're doing the postmortem, seeing what happened. Maybe they spoiled them a little bit or gave them too much power. I understand that you can get into that. It's interesting to me, the bigger picture. And Tim McMahon did excellent reporting. I'm not saying, but it's all over the press now today.